1854, there's another one of these fragments, these little incomplete documents where he says, okay, you want to justify slavery. What do you think will make it all right for you to enslave a fellow human being? Oh, because their skin is darker than yours. Well, my skin's darker than yours. Are you going to enslave me? Because you think they're not as intelligent? He says, all right, well, lots of people are smarter than others. Does that mean they have a right to enslave those people? And finally, he gets to something that I think is deeply important to Lincoln throughout his life, which is this idea that might does not make right. He says, oh, because you're more powerful, that's why you're going to enslave this person? Well, you better be careful, because someone more powerful may come along and enslave you.
After serving in the state legislature for 4 straight terms in 1834 through 1842, Lincoln eventually decided to get involved in national politics. He found out that he was really good at politics.
In the 1850s, Lincoln wanted to be elected to the U.S. Senate. And in 1858, he seemed to have his best shot. And he was up against Stephen Douglas, the little giant of Illinois. And Douglas is the most powerful Democrat in the Senate in the 1850s, and Lincoln is going to challenge him for that seat. Now, Lincoln was not as big of a name as Douglas. He needed Douglas, in a sense, to gain traction for his own campaign.
Lincoln's original plan was to follow Douglas everywhere, and he said, hey, wait, why don't we just make this a regular gig? Let's just spend the rest of 1858 having debates. And Douglas wasn't going to do that. He says, hey, Lincoln, if you stop following me around, I will agree to a formal debate with you in the remaining congressional districts, which are 7.
And in the fall of 1858, these two men tour Illinois. Lincoln, in a much more modest way than Douglas. Douglas is riding around with a lot of pomp and fanfare on trains with bands.
The second debate is a really important one. It was held in Freeport, Illinois, and what's been known as the Freeport doctrine. In the first debate in Ottawa, Illinois, Douglas posed 7 questions to Lincoln to basically make Lincoln look like an abolitionist. Lincoln in Freeport says to Douglas, you're this really smart guy. You asked me 7 questions that I've answered. I've only come up with 4. He asks Douglas, you keep saying we Republicans are revolutionary for resisting the Dred Scott opinion. We don't resist it, but we disagree with it. You've been treating Supreme Court opinions as if they are a thus saith the Lord, but you also are a champion of popular sovereignty. What's it gonna be, Douglas? What's more important, a Supreme Court opinion? Is that the supreme law of the land? Or can it be overturned and ignored by a local law passed by a territory? Douglas's future is on the line here because he knows if he says popular sovereignty, it'll tube his chances with the South. But if he says, no, Dred Scott's more important, his signature policy is into the trash can. What does Douglas do? He puts his eggs in the popular sovereignty basket. It's at that point in 1858 that Southerners start demanding a federal slave code for slavery in the territories.
Many people believe that Lincoln won those debates, but he was not then made a senator. That was up to the state legislature, and they selected Douglas.
In touring the state with Douglas, Lincoln begins to make a real national name for himself. Readers of newspapers around the Midwest and around the country are going to read excerpts or even whole accounts of the Lincoln-Douglas debates. And they know who Stephen Douglas is. Now they're beginning to learn who Abraham Lincoln is as well.
There are points in his development as a politician where he could have backed off, he could have said something not quite as gutsy, but he takes an ethical stance. Yes, he's a politician, and he's a great politician, and he will pull his punches. Yet in the House Divided speech, he's actually coming right out and saying, those people trying to spread slavery everywhere, it forces people to recognize that there is a choice between good and evil. There's a choice between slavery and freedom. There's a choice between putting slavery on a path to extinction or spreading it everywhere. That half measures really are not going to work anymore. It's either going to become all slavery or all free. This can't go on this way. And although he doesn't come right out and explain that there should be freedom everywhere, he does say something that in the ears of, say, more moderate 19th century Republicans would have sounded controversial, which is that, yeah, eventually slavery will be put on a path to extinction. That is radical. And it takes courage sometimes for politicians to come out and take an ethical stance when they are worried that they're going to lose power or they're not going to be elected. And this is Lincoln's great chance to reach the national stage. As a senator from Illinois, he will have a lot of influence. So the fact that he was willing to come right out and take a moral stance is admirable.